Andrew Larson sat at his favorite deli shop, the same one he had been visiting nearly every day for the past 3 years. The scent of freshly baked bread and sizzling bacon filled the air as he took a sip of his coffee, trying to shake off the exhaustion of another long morning. Just as he was about to take a bite of his sandwich, his phone rang. He sighed when he saw the caller ID, his mother. "Yes, Mother," he answered, already bracing himself for whatever she was about to say. "Son, are you bringing a date to your sister's wedding?" "I put you down for a +1, Patricia Larson said, her voice firm as ever. Andrew froze. His mind raced. A date? He had completely forgotten about that. He had been so caught up in work and his usual routine that it had slipped his mind entirely. "Mother, let me get back to you. I forgot about that," he admitted. "You forgot about your sister's wedding?" she asked, clearly unimpressed. "No, Mother, I forgot to ask my date about coming," he said quickly, trying to smooth things over. "I'll call you back later." Ending the call, he set his phone down on the table and sighed. He rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of yet another thing to deal with. Rachel, the deli server, noticed his expression as she placed his plate in front of him. "Hey, Mr. Larson, what's wrong?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. Andrew looked up at her, still lost in thought. "I need a date for my sister's wedding." Rachel chuckled, crossing her arms. "That shouldn't be a problem for you. There are plenty of ladies in your social circle who would be happy to go with you." Andrew sighed. "That's the problem. I don't want any of them. There'll be too many expectations, too many presumptions." Rachel smirked. "Well, I'm sure you'll figure something out." She placed his sandwich in front of him. "And remember, this is lunch, not dinner. I had to call your assistant twice last week to make sure you ate. You rushed out of here for another meeting." Andrew laughed. "You know me too well." Rachel shrugged. "I should. You've been coming here for 3 years. I probably know more about you than your own family." Something clicked in Andrew's mind. He stared at Rachel for a moment as an idea formed. "Hey, Rachel," he said slowly, "can you be my date?" Rachel burst into laughter. "No way. I don't fit in your world." Andrew leaned forward. "You're right, you know me better than anyone, and I know about your family, so when people ask questions, it won't be hard to answer. Everyone knows I come here all the time. It would be believable if we say we met here." Rachel shook her head. "Be serious. I'm not like them." Andrew held her gaze. "I don't need you to be. I just need you to be you. If I had a problem with that, I wouldn't be here every day." Rachel exhaled, rolling her eyes slightly. "Let me think about it." Andrew grinned. "That's all I ask." She walked away, shaking her head, while he took a bite of his sandwich. He didn't know if she would actually say yes, but for the first time since his mother's call, he felt a little lighter. Maybe this wouldn't be such a disaster after all. Rachel returned home that evening, still thinking about Andrew's offer. She hadn't expected him to ask her, of all people, to be his date. It wasn't that she didn't like him. On the contrary, she enjoyed his company, but their worlds were vastly different. As she kicked off her shoes and flopped onto the couch, her best friend, Tanya, who had been scrolling through her phone, glanced up. "You look like you've got something on your mind," Tanya said. Rachel sighed. "Andrew Larson asked me to be his date for his sister's wedding." Tanya's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, the Andrew Larson? The guy you've been serving sandwiches to for the last 3 years? The one who practically lives at your deli?" Rachel nodded. Tanya grinned. "Girl, go. He's not asking you to be in a real relationship. He just needs a +1. Go see how the other side lives and have fun." Rachel hesitated. "I don't know. I mean, it's one thing to serve him lunch every day, but being his date? What if I embarrass myself?" Tanya rolled her eyes. "Please, you deal with customers all day, handle all kinds of people, and never back down from anyone. You'll be fine. Besides, it's a free fancy wedding, good food, and a chance to dress up. What's the worst that could happen?" Rachel thought about it. Maybe Tanya had a point. The next day, Rachel waited until the lunch rush died down before approaching Andrew's table. He looked up from his laptop and raised an eyebrow. "So," she said, crossing her arms, Before I agree, I need to know something. Am I just your plus one, or am I your girlfriend for the night? Andrew blinked, as if he hadn't considered the distinction. I haven't thought about that. Rachel scoffed. Seriously? You invite me, and you don't even know what role I'm playing? He closed his laptop and leaned forward. Okay, here's the thing. If you come as just my plus one, my mother will take that as an opportunity to set me up with someone. But if you come as my girlfriend, I have a better chance of avoiding any matchmaking attempts. Rachel smirked. So, you want a pretend girlfriend? Andrew shrugged. That shouldn't be a problem. We're already comfortable with each other. Rachel tapped her fingers on the table. Yeah, but we've never held hands, kissed, or been seen together like the people in your social circle expect. We'd have to make it convincing. Andrew reached across the table and took her hands in his. There, we've held hands. Rachel raised an eyebrow. That was easy. He smirked. Now, lean over and kiss me on the cheek. Rachel hesitated, then shrugged. She leaned in and gave him a quick peck on the cheek. Done, she said, pulling back. Andrew nodded. Great, now we've handled the basics. Next step, we go out tomorrow night to a nice restaurant. That way we can get used to being seen together in public before the wedding. Rachel laughed. You're a fast thinker, Mr. Larson. He grinned. Call me Andrew. We're dating now, remember? Rachel shook her head, still amused, and walked away. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. At the restaurant, Rachel felt a bit out of place. The dim lighting, elegant decor, and hushed atmosphere were a stark contrast to the lively, bustling deli she was used to. Andrew, however, looked completely at ease, scanning the menu as if he had been there 100 times, which, knowing him, he probably had. After the waiter took their orders, Andrew set his menu aside and looked at her. I've made arrangements for you at a local dress shop, he said casually. They'll take care of your wardrobe for the wedding. Rachel nearly choked on her drink. Wait, what? It's already taken care of, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Rachel shook her head. No, you can't do that. Andrew leaned forward. Rachel, people are going to expect you to look a certain way. This isn't about changing you. It's just making sure you fit into the event. Besides, this is my way of saying thank you. Rachel exhaled, still unsure. I don't know. There's one more thing, he added. We'll be gone for 5 days. Rachel nearly dropped her glass. 5 days? Andrew nodded. The wedding is taking place at my family home in Connecticut. There are pre-wedding events, dinners, brunches. It's a whole thing. Rachel groaned. Andrew, I have work. That's not a problem. Carl and I already talked, and he said you deserve the time to enjoy yourself. Rachel's eyes widened. You talked to Carl? My manager? Without asking me first? Andrew shrugged. Handled. Rachel laughed, shaking her head. Oh, I cannot believe there's something you forgot. Andrew frowned. What did I forget? She smirked. My rent. I still have bills to pay. Andrew's expression faltered for the first time. Oh. Rachel chuckled. See? Even Mr. Perfect misses a detail now and then. Without hesitation, Andrew pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. Rachel narrowed her eyes. What are you doing? Taking care of some unfinished business. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his phone. Put that down. Let's enjoy our meal. Andrew hesitated, then smirked and set his phone aside. All right, Rachel, no more business tonight. The two of them spent the rest of the dinner swapping childhood stories. Rachel talking about growing up in a small neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, and Andrew sharing tales of private schools, summer homes, and family expectations. Despite their differences, Rachel realized something. Andrew wasn't as out of reach as she thought. He was just a guy trying to navigate his world, just like her. And for the next 5 days, she was about to step into that world alongside him. As they pulled up to Andrew's childhood home, Rachel's nerves kicked in. The estate was massive, rolling green lawns, towering trees, and a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. This wasn't just wealth. This was old money. She took a deep breath as Andrew stepped out of the car and walked around to open her door. Ready? He asked with a small smile. Rachel nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. Inside, they were immediately greeted by Patricia Larson, a woman who exuded both elegance and authority. She smiled warmly at Rachel, surprising her. "You must be Rachel," Patricia said. "Welcome to our home. Come, lunch is ready." Rachel followed them into the dining room, still half expecting some sort of cold reception. But to her surprise, Patricia treated her no differently than she did Andrew. They ate together, discussing travel, books, and, to Rachel's relief, nothing too intimidating. Partway through the meal, Ivy, Andrew's sister, arrived. She was glowing with excitement for her upcoming wedding. When she saw Rachel, she grinned. "Andrew, you finally brought someone." "It's so nice to meet you, Rachel." Rachel smiled. "It's nice to meet you too." Over the next few days, Andrew showed Rachel around the estate, sharing stories of his childhood mischief, sneaking into the kitchen for late-night snacks, playing pranks on his tutors, and even getting lost in the hedge maze once. Rachel also found herself bonding with the staff. They spoke fondly of Andrew, telling her about his kindness, the way he helped whenever he could, and how he always remembered their names. As Rachel listened, she realized something. Andrew wasn't just some rich businessman. He was a nice person. And that was something money couldn't buy. On the third day of their stay, an unexpected visitor arrived, Lora Tanning. Rachel didn't know much about her, but she didn't like the way the woman swept into the house as if she owned the place. Lora was tall, blonde, and draped in designer clothing, carrying an air of entitlement that set Rachel on edge the moment she walked in. "Oh, Andrew," Lora cooed, completely ignoring Rachel. "It's been forever. I didn't know you were back in town." Before Andrew could respond, Lora took a step closer, brushing a hand over his arm. Rachel might as well have been invisible. Rachel felt the burn of irritation rising in her chest. She had been underestimated before, but something about the way Lora barely acknowledged her existence was enough to set her off. Andrew, however, acted swiftly. He wrapped an arm around Rachel's waist and pulled her close. "Lora, this is Rachel, my date for Ivy's wedding." Laura's eyes flicked to Rachel, barely concealing her distaste. "Oh," she said, lips curving into a forced smile. "How nice." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "Yeah, it is nice. And just so we're clear, Andrew is not available." Lora let out a soft, dismissive laugh. "Oh, come on, we're old friends. I'm sure we'll find time to catch up, have a drink, maybe even share a dance." Rachel cut her off. "No, you won't." Lora blinked, clearly not used to being challenged. "There will be no catching up, no drinks, and definitely no dance. You can take that idea and toss it right out with your expensive perfume," Rachel added, folding her arms. Patricia, who had been watching with raised eyebrows, suddenly stepped in. "Lora, why don't we take a walk in the garden?" Her tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. Lora huffed, but followed Patricia out, throwing one last glance over her shoulder at Andrew. Once they were gone, Andrew turned to Rachel, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Remind me to never cross you," he said with a laugh. Rachel smirked. "She's not my first tiger." "But what she doesn't know." She leaned in slightly. "I'm a lion. I pounce on my prey." Andrew burst out laughing. "Noted." Rachel grinned, feeling victorious. Lora Tanning had picked the wrong woman to ignore. Later that afternoon, Ivy sat down with Andrew and Rachel in the lounge, a mischievous smile on her face. "I heard about what happened with Lora," she said, crossing her legs. "And I have to say I'm impressed. You didn't let her money or attitude intimidate you." Rachel smirked. "Why would I? She's just another person. Doesn't matter how much money she has." Andrew chuckled. "You should have seen how she talked to me the first time I went to the deli. She treated me just like every other customer. No special treatment." "That's why you kept going back?" Ivy asked, raising an eyebrow. Andrew nodded. "Well, that and the sandwiches." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Of course the sandwiches." Ivy laughed. "Well, I like you, Rachel. My brother finally developed good taste in women." Rachel arched a brow. "Finally?" "Oh, don't get me started," Ivy teased. "Let's just say his past choices weren't exactly great." Andrew groaned. "Ivy, let's not turn this into a history lesson." Before Ivy could respond, Patricia entered the room, looking as composed as ever. "All right, enough gossip. We have planning to do. The wedding is 2 days away, and I need everyone in place. Ivy sighed dramatically. Duty calls. Patricia gave her daughter a knowing look before turning to Rachel with a warm smile. Rachel, I hope you're settling in. Rachel smiled back. I am. Thank you. Patricia nodded. Good. Now let's get moving. We'll all talk later. As Patricia and Ivy left, Andrew turned to Rachel. See, you're already part of the family. Rachel smiled. Maybe, just maybe, she was. The garden had been completely transformed, twinkling lights, cascading floral arrangements, and elegant seating that gave the entire place a dreamy glow. The wedding ceremony itself was breathtaking, filled with laughter, heartfelt vows, and the warmth of family. After the ceremony, Andrew led Rachel around the reception, introducing her to family, friends, and influential board members. Rachel had been nervous at first, unsure of how she'd be received, but to her surprise, nearly everyone was polite and welcoming. Many guests asked how she and Andrew met, but none seemed surprised when they learned that he had practically lived at the Deli for the past 3 years. Oh, that makes perfect sense, one of Andrew's uncles said with a chuckle. We all knew he had a favorite place, but we didn't know he had a favorite person there, too. Rachel smiled, feeling more at ease. It wasn't so bad after all. The night was going smoothly, until she arrived. Lora. Rachel noticed her out of the corner of her eye, striding across the dance floor like she had a mission. She wasn't surprised when Lora walked straight up to Andrew, flashing her best smile as if their previous interaction hadn't happened. Andrew, Lora purred, ignoring Rachel entirely. Come dance with me, for old time's sake. Before Andrew could even open his mouth, Rachel stepped forward. No, she said, her voice calm but firm. This dance belongs to me. Laura's face twisted in irritation, but Rachel didn't give her a chance to respond. She slipped her hand into Andrew's and pulled him onto the dance floor. As they swayed to the slow music, Andrew grinned. I have to admit, I love seeing you put Lora in her place. Rachel smirked. She doesn't scare me. Good. He spun her gently, then pulled her back into his arms. His expression softened. Rachel, I need to ask you something. Rachel tilted her head. Go on. Andrew hesitated for only a second before saying, I see you in a different way now. This past week, it's changed things for me. I don't want to pretend anymore. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She had felt the shift too, but hearing him say it made it real. She smiled. I think we can stop pretending. Andrew's eyes darkened with something more than just affection. He leaned in, pressing a deep, lingering kiss to her lips, right in the middle of the dance floor. Rachel melted into it, completely forgetting about the people around them, except for one person who most certainly hadn't forgotten about them. Lora. Rachel could feel the heat of her glare even before she heard the sharp sound of heels clicking against the stone path. Lora was fuming, her entire body tense with frustration. She stormed across the garden straight toward Patricia, her voice sharp and demanding. Patricia, you need to talk to Andrew. He's making a fool of himself. Patricia, who had been sipping champagne and enjoying her daughter's wedding, sighed and set down her glass. Lora, this is not the time for this discussion. But Lora wasn't backing down. Her voice rose in frustration. Are you seriously going to stand by and let her take Andrew away from me? He belongs with someone of our status, not some deli worker. Before Patricia could respond, Ivy walked over, her expression cold and unimpressed. What's going on? Ivy asked, crossing her arms. Lora spun to face her. You have to talk some sense into your brother. He's embarrassing himself, choosing her over me. It's ridiculous. By this time, guests had started turning their heads, sensing the drama unfolding. A small crowd gathered, watching with curious eyes. Ivy took a step closer, looking Lora directly in the eye. My brother is a grown man, fully capable of making his own decisions. And if he chooses Rachel over you, that's his choice. Laura's nostrils flared. But nothing, Ivy interrupted. This is my wedding day, and you're ruining it with this nonsense. I've had enough. You need to leave. Lora looked stunned, glancing from Ivy to Patricia, searching for someone to back her up. When neither woman budged, she let out a frustrated huff and turned on her heel, storming out of the garden. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring about what they had just witnessed. Rachel let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Andrew chuckled beside her. "Well," he said, squeezing her hand, "that was eventful." Rachel grinned. "I'd say it was overdue." Andrew leaned in, brushing his lips against her temple. "You're incredible, you know that?" Rachel smirked. "I told you." "I'm a lion." Andrew laughed. "Yes, you are, and I think I might just be in love with you." Rachel's heart fluttered at his words. She turned to face him, resting a hand on his chest. "Well, Andrew Larson," she said, smiling, "you might just be in luck. I am feeling the same way." And with that, she pulled him into another kiss, this time just for them. The next morning, a loud knock on Andrew's door jolted Rachel awake. "Wake up, you lovebirds," Patricia's voice called through the door. "I need to talk to both of you." Rachel's eyes went wide as panic set in. She yanked the covers over her head. "Oh my God, it's your mom. She knows I'm in here. I'm so embarrassed." Andrew, still half asleep, groaned and stretched. "Yeah, she probably went to your room first," he smirked sleepily. "She's thorough like that." Rachel swatted him. "This isn't funny." But Andrew just chuckled and rolled out of bed. "Come on, let's get this over with." Downstairs at the breakfast table, Patricia sat with her coffee in hand, waiting for them. Rachel tried to act natural, but the knowing look Patricia gave her made her squirm slightly. Patricia didn't waste time. "You know Lora is going to retaliate for what happened last night," she said, setting her cup down. "She won't take this lightly, and she certainly won't go quietly. You need to be prepared." Just then, Andrew's phone began to ping repeatedly with notifications. Rachel's phone vibrated a few times as well. Andrew picked up his phone, frowning. "Well, that didn't take long." Rachel glanced at the screen and sighed. Social media was flooded with posts about their relationship, gossip columns speculating about how she had chased after Andrew for years, painting her as some scheming woman who had preyed on him. Andrew's jaw tightened. "I need to make some calls." Before he could leave the table, Rachel reached out and grabbed his hand. "No," she said firmly. "I can take this. Remember, I'm a lion." Andrew paused, then a slow smile spread across his face. Rachel smirked. "Now let's eat. I'm hungry. Hand me those pancakes." Patricia watched the exchange, then gave her son an approving nod. Rachel wasn't just holding her own, she was proving that she belonged by Andrew's side. Andrew and Patricia sat in the lounge, going over strategies to stop Lora's smear campaign while waiting for lunch to be served. Patricia tapped her fingers thoughtfully against the table. "She's going to keep pushing this narrative," Patricia said. "We need to control the story before it spirals further." Andrew nodded. "I'll have my PR team draft a statement, maybe set up a private interview to address everything." Before he could finish, Rachel strolled into the room, casually tucking her phone into her pocket. "What are you two plotting?" she asked, arching a brow. Andrew smirked, figuring out how to stop Lora. Rachel waved a hand. "Oh, I've got that handled." Andrew and Patricia exchanged surprised looks. "You do?" Andrew asked skeptically. Rachel nodded. "We're doing a live interview tomorrow morning at the Deli." Andrew blinked. "A live interview? Rachel, we need the PR team involved in this. It should be private, controlled." "Why?" Rachel interrupted, crossing her arms. "We don't need to rehearse or craft a polished image. The public needs to see the real us. That's what will shut Lora down." Andrew hesitated. He was used to media being carefully curated, every word planned. But then Rachel threw in, "Oh, and don't wear that gray suit. It's too stiff, too business. Wear the blue one that I like. It matches your eyes, makes you look more approachable." Patricia suddenly burst into laughter, shaking her head. "I really like her," she said, looking at Andrew. "She's a keeper." Andrew glanced at Rachel, who stood confidently with a smirk, completely unfazed. He sighed, shaking his head with a smile. "All right, Lion, let's do it your way." Sitting at the local deli, Rachel adjusted Andrew's tie, making sure it was straight, then smoothed out her own dress. She wasn't nervous, at least she kept telling herself that, but the energy in the small shop was different today. Cameras were set up, reporters were present, and there was an undeniable buzz in the air. Andrew, as calm as ever, glanced at her with a reassuring smile. "You ready, Lion?" he murmured. Rachel smirked. "Always." The interviewer, a polished woman with a warm but professional demeanor, sat across from them. The cameraman signaled they were live, and the interview began. "Mr. Larson," the interviewer started, "you've been coming to this deli nearly every day for the past 3 years. Why?" Andrew smiled. "Because the people here are friendly and real. They don't treat me any differently from anyone else. My money has no influence here. It's nice to have a place where I'm just Andrew and not Andrew Larson, CEO." The interviewer nodded, then turned to Rachel. "How did the two of you meet?" Rachel chuckled. "Well, he came in speaking as if I worked for him. I told him, 'Put me on your payroll, then maybe I'll jump through hoops for you.'" Andrew laughed, shaking his head. "True story." Rachel continued. "Surprisingly, he came back the next day and asked for my serving area. I thought he was going to make trouble, but instead, he just asked, 'How are you doing today?' We've been talking ever since." The interviewer smiled. Was it love at first sight? Andrew and Rachel looked at each other before bursting into laughter. "No way," Rachel said, shaking her head. "But," Andrew added, "over time, we became friends, and then, more." The interviewer nodded. "Now, let's address something that's been making headlines. Miss Lora Tanning's allegations that Rachel is only after your money. What do you say to that?" Andrew's expression hardened slightly. "That is completely false." The interviewer glanced at her notes. "Well, isn't it true that you paid Rachel's rent this month?" Rachel's eyes widened. "What?" she exclaimed, sitting up straight. "That's not true. He has never paid any of my bills." She turned to Andrew. "Right?" Andrew hesitated. Rachel's stomach dropped. "Andrew?" Andrew sighed. "Well, you did say you couldn't go to the wedding because you needed to work and pay your rent. So, I took care of it." Rachel jumped up from her seat. "You had no right to do that." Andrew ran a hand through his hair. "I needed you with me. I haven't gone more than 2 days without seeing you. How was I going to go for 5 days without you?" Rachel glared at him. "But you went behind my back. Do you realize how this looks? Now I do look like what Lora says about me." Andrew took a deep breath. "Look, I love you, and I should be able to do things for you." Rachel pressed her face into her hands, overwhelmed. Andrew reached forward, gently grabbing her shoulders. "Rachel," he said softly. She slowly looked up at him, her eyes full of mixed emotions. "You're right, and I understand how you feel," she whispered. "I love you too, but I need you to respect my wishes." Andrew smiled slightly. "Understood." Rachel sighed and looked at him out of the corner of her eye. Then with a smirk she said, "You know, Avsafu, when we get married, I want have no problem spending your money." The deli fell silent. Andrew and Rachel had forgotten they were on live television. The interviewer's eyes widened. "Wait, are you getting married?" Rachel's face turned red. "No, no, 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 no. That was a joke." Andrew, however, didn't laugh. His expression turned serious. "Nothing about us is a joke," he said. Rachel turned to him, blinking. "Andrew, what are you?" Before she could finish, Andrew pushed back his chair and dropped to one knee. The entire deli gasped. The cameras zoomed in. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as Andrew pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing an elegant vintage ring. "This was my grandmother's ring," he said. "My mom gave it to me before we left yesterday." He looked up at Rachel, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Rachel, I love you. You challenge me, you make me laugh, and you see me. Not my money, not my business, just me. You're the person I didn't even know I needed. So, let's stop pretending. Let's stop fighting over what we should do and just do what we want to do." He took a breath. "Rachel, will you marry me?" Rachel was speechless. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stared down at the man who had turned her world upside down in the best way possible. Slowly, she leaned down and cupped his face. Instead of answering with words, she kissed him. Deeply, passionately, fully. The entire deli erupted in cheers. As she pulled back, she nodded, wiping away a tear. "Yes," she whispered. Andrew grinned and slipped the ring onto her finger. The interviewer, still in shock, turned to the camera. Well, I think we just witnessed history, folks. Rachel and Andrew laughed, holding on to each other as the rest of the world caught up to what had just happened. They came into the interview as a couple with something to prove. They were leaving it as something much more. After the whirlwind of the live interview, Andrew and Rachel barely had time to process everything before Andrew's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and smirked. "Hello, Mom." Patricia's voice came through the speaker, amused as ever. "Well, you two were interesting this morning." Rachel, still staring at the engagement ring on her finger in disbelief, snapped her attention to the call. "Oh no, we made a spectacle, didn't we?" Patricia chuckled. "Let's just say no one will be questioning your relationship anymore." Andrew grinned. "That was the point, wasn't it?" "Of course," Patricia said. "Now, Rachel, can you come next weekend so we can start planning for the wedding?" Rachel nearly choked. "Wait, next weekend?" "Yes, dear," Patricia said in a tone that left no room for argument. "We have a lot to do, and if I know my son, he'll drag his feet if we don't get started immediately." Andrew sighed. "Mom?" Patricia cut him off. "Speaking of which, thank you for finally proposing, Andrew. If I hadn't given you that ring, Rachel would have been stuck waiting another 3 years for you to make a move." Rachel snorted while Andrew groaned. "Mom, seriously?" "I'm just stating facts," Patricia said, clearly pleased with herself. "Now, enjoy your engagement. I'll see you both next weekend." And with that, she hung up. Rachel burst into laughter. "I love your mom." Andrew rolled his eyes but smiled. Yeah, she's something else." Rachel grinned and took his hand. "So, we're really doing this?" Andrew squeezed her fingers. "Yeah, Lion, we really are." The past year had been a blur of wedding planning, business expansions, and Rachel adjusting to a world she never imagined she'd be part of. But through it all, one thing remained the same. She and Andrew had each other. Now, as music played and guests stood in anticipation, Andrew stood at the end of the aisle, waiting for his bride. He tugged at his cufflinks, exhaling slowly. He wasn't nervous about marrying Rachel. He had known for a long time she was the one. But the moment felt surreal. Ivy, standing beside him as one of his attendants, nudged him. "Relax, Andrew. She's not going to change her mind." He smirked. "I know." "Good, because if she did, I'd still make her my sister." Andrew chuckled, but then stilled as the music shifted. And then, there she was. Rachel appeared at the other end of the aisle, looking radiant in an elegant white gown. Her eyes locked with his, and that familiar smirk played on her lips. The same one she gave him the first time he walked into the deli and tried to act like he was in charge. His heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the overwhelming love he felt for her. As she walked toward him, Andrew knew. This wasn't just the happiest day of his life. It was the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. Hope you enjoyed this wonderful story by Green Tea Tales. Help our channel to grow by like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.